Hello everyone, my name is Martina Monday. You are welcome to Nebo TV. Today's topic focuses on the extinction of our native languages. The United Nations has recently said that 90% of all indigenous languages will disappear within 100 years. With the ongoing trend of globalization, it is obvious that indigenous cultures and languages are threatened with extinction. The rate at which we speak our indigenous languages is gradually reducing. The rapid extinction of native languages in some African countries started in the colonial era, when children were punished for speaking their native languages or vernacular on the school premises. The colonial power in Africa at that time prohibited the speaking of indigenous languages in schools. In Canada, for instance, record shows that during the period of residential school, indigenous students caught speaking an indigenous language to each other were often physically punished. As a result, thousands of indigenous students that attended residential schools in Canada were unable to pass their languages on to their own children. There is no doubt that indigenous languages and cultures were suppressed by the colonial power during the expansion of European territories in Africa, North America, and some other parts of the world.
The United Nations estimates that more than half of the indigenous languages in the world could disappear before the end of the century. More than half. The next 10 years are critical to make indigenous languages living languages. Around the world, indigenous peoples are mobilizing to teach their languages to younger generations. We are working hard to speak our languages every day, at home, in ceremonies, at school, at community events, and in all aspects of our daily lives. However, the challenge is immense. The state of indigenous languages is a consequence of decades of colonialism, racism, and discrimination. Terrible harm has been done. Undoing that harm requires concerted and coordinated action in every region of the world, including here at home. In Canada, there is hope.
According to the United Nations, the decline of our indigenous cultures and languages can be traced to the loss of access to lands, territories, and natural resources. The result has been that indigenous cultures today are threatened with extinction in many parts of the world. Due to the fact that they have been excluded from decision-making and policy frameworks of the nation-states, in which they live and have been subjected to processes of domination and discrimination, their cultures have been viewed as being inferior, primitive, irrelevant, something to be eradicated or transformed. 90% of all languages will disappear within 100 years. It is usually estimated that there are between 6,000 and 7,000 oral languages in the world today. Most of these languages are spoken by very few people, while a handful of them are spoken by an overwhelming majority of the world. About 97% of the world's population speak 4% of its languages, while only 3% speak 96% of them. A great majority of these languages are spoken by indigenous people, and many, if not all of them, are in danger of becoming extinct. Roughly 90% of all existing languages may become extinct within the next 100 years. While some indigenous people are successfully revitalizing languages, many others are fighting a losing battle, where languages are simply no longer passed from one generation to the next. Most governments are aware of this language crisis, but funding is often provided for the recording of languages, while limited funds are diverted to language revitalization programs. Language, furthermore, is not only a communication tool, it is often linked to the land or region traditionally occupied by indigenous people. It is an essential component of one's collective and individual identity, and therefore provides a sense of belonging and community. When the language dies, that sense of community is damaged. Traditional food lengthens life. It is now emerging that indigenous people's overall health, well-being, and cultural continuity are directly related to the ability to consume their traditional foods and continue their traditional food practices. This realization has led to calls to governments to incorporate culture into the development of sustainable agriculture, food system, and related practices, policies, and programs that respect and support the well-being of indigenous people, using customary law embedded in spiritual cosmology. A great deal of traditional knowledge, including customary law and folklore, have been undermined and destroyed by colonizers and post-colonial states who imposed their own system of law, knowledge, and worldview on indigenous people. Today, however, there is an increasing appreciation of the value and potential of traditional knowledge. In 2016, the General Assembly proclaimed 2019 to be the International Year of Indigenous Languages. UNESCO took the lead, and in cooperation with indigenous people, member states, and PFII, the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous People, the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous People, and a range of different stakeholders, developed an action plan for the year. Thank you for listening to News on Nebo TV. Again, I'm Martina Monday.